Thank you, Mr. Brian Hook, for accepting Azerbaijan News Television's invitation for this interview. So let me first begin with this question that what the United States thinks or what is the United States State Department's opinion when it comes to the recent brutal crackdown on the peaceful protesters in Iran. What do you make of that carnage that had happened by the Iranian regime?
The Iranian regime has been mismanaging its economy for 40 years, and they have been prioritizing the sectarian ideology instead of investing in their own people. And so most of their money gets invested in their proxies so that they can then expand Iran's power projection. And it's a revolutionary agenda. When the regime that is very rich, and their proxies have been rich until we started reversing the sanctions, when the regime increased the price of gas and started rationing gas, the Iranian people took to the streets. But what began as a protest against gas quickly turned into countrywide protests against the regime itself. This is the deadliest political crisis in the 40-year history of the Republic. And we have had, what I said today, there could be as many as 1,000 people who have been murdered by the regime. And you have had thousands injured, and as many as 7,000 people arrested. In the Green Revolution in 2009, during that period, there were 72 people who were killed. We're in a much different place right now. So today, we made clear that we're standing with the Iranian people. All of the people who are in prisons, their sentences should be commuted and they should be released. And we call on all nations around the world to diplomatically isolate the regime and to impose sanctions on the people who are murdering their own people.
So Iranian people, including pro-democracy forces and opposition forces, they are appreciating the United States maximum pressure campaign and sanction within this campaign. And recently, we heard that the United States government is is considering further sanctions on human rights violation ground, and that was very very much praised by the Iranian people and especially South Azerbaijani, Turkish people as well. Can you elaborate on that, on the details of those sanctions related to the human rights violations of Iranian authorities?
Very quickly after the Iranian regime shut down the internet, so the protesters couldn't broadcast the brutality of the regime, we sanctioned the Minister of Communications and Technology, who is responsible for shutting down the internet. There are more sanctions coming against those officials who are violating the basic human rights of the Iranian people. The constitution of this government says that they will protect rights to freedom of assembly, free press, and free speech. And instead of protecting them, they're the chief violators of these rights. These people need to be held accountable for their criminal acts against their own people. The supreme leader called the Iranian protesters thugs. And that tells you something about what he thinks about people who are tired of the corruption and the terrible economy and the low standard of living and the pollution and the environmental destruction. And so this is a regime that every single decade and year after year loses more and more support for its government. During these protests, 9 seminaries were burned. And so now you're starting to lose even that support which the regime historically has relied upon.
Okay, finally, as you might be aware, the ethnic and religious, in this case ethnic minorities, bore the brunt of the atrocities and the death tolls and over the recent protests.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that the United States State Department has some mechanisms to further protect the rights of the minorities, religious minorities. Mm-hmm. In the case of the ethnic minorities in Iran and the underrepresented people, what do you think that the United States can do? What steps it can take in order to help them to be their voice to be heard?
Well, one of the things that we do, and I've been doing for a long time, is telling their story. talking about the ethnic discrimination and the religious discrimination that so many people have experienced. And the regime jails, detains, tortures, and murders ethnic minorities. They also have done the same thing to various religions. For those who believe in religious freedom, the regime has been very hard on them. And so we stand for them. We try to tell their story. We've had 2 ministerials here at the State Department on religious freedom, and we highlight what the regime is doing, and we try to diplomatically isolate them so that we try to make this harder and harder for Iran to get away with it. When Iran does this kind of discrimination, they're hoping that the world isn't watching. And so we're always trying to shine a spotlight on what the regime is doing to discriminate against minorities, whether it's on the basis of ethnicity or on their religious faith. And we're going to continue doing that.
Thank you so much. Any final words for the Azerbaijani Turks in Iran? Any message?
I don't have any specific message other than we call on all governments to isolate the regime and to sanction those officials who are responsible for the murders of so many innocent Iranian people.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hook, for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.